I need to start this video by saying that I am not particularly interested in zombies. They're a great archetype, used in a lot of interesting places, but the zombie boom was 10 years ago. We got our fill of brains and severed body parts back then, and moved on to greener, less apocalyptic pastures. I haven't missed it terribly. Until now. A few weeks ago, I read the book The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, and I have to say, at least for me, it gave the undead new life. It presents one of the most interesting takes on zombies I have ever seen. One that argues with our concept of them as a mindless mass obstacle to surmount. Maybe they could be something a little deeper, a little closer to home. Maybe they could even be the hero of the story. A big thanks to Campfire writing and world-building software for making this video possible, and to all of our supporters on Patreon. We love you. The Girl with All the Gifts doesn't feel like a zombie story when you first start it. Yes, it is an apocalyptic setting, and yes, the world is teeming with the shambling husks of the undead. But right from the start, you know that this is a story about children. Strange children who have to be kept imprisoned because they'll fly into a bloody frenzy at the first smell of human flesh and try to eat any living person they can get their little hands on, but children all the same. Kids who want to play and draw pictures and explore and learn things. They can't help that they have these urges. In fact, they're scared and confused at that side of themselves. A very small spoiler here, but given the thumbnail of the video, I'd be surprised if you hadn't guessed it by now. They are part zombie. Human all the way through, except when the urge to feed strikes. Then, there's something else entirely. It's one of the freshest and most heart-wrenching takes on zombies I've seen in a long time. It made me respect all the potential the archetype could have if we let it. But wait! You might already be typing in the comments, that's not a zombie! Zombies look like this. They shamble around aimlessly. They've got rotting flesh and disfigured bodies. They're certainly not just normal kids with a cannibalism quirk. And okay, I hear you. I understand. The zombie you're talking about is the one we all know and love. It is iconic. Deviate too much from it, and it feels like you're not really dealing with the zombie anymore. But I think it only feels that way because of how saturated we were with it for years and years. This zombie, the classic mindless decomposing shambler, freshly risen from the grave, it didn't actually have much of a presence until 1968 with the release of George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Before that, they were usually either the creations of voodoo magic or dark scientific dabbling. In either case, before that movie, they were very different creatures, usually more like servitors or philosophical anomalies a la Frankenstein's monster. Even during the zombie boom of the 2010s, we saw a shift away from undeath to viral infection. A lot of the creatures that made zombies most famous, like those from 28 Days Later and Resident Evil, weren't actually zombies in that sense at all, just horrifically altered humans. And yet, it would be silly not to call any one of those things a zombie. They all have something in common that we recognize innately. The thing at their core, the thing that solidified them not just as a recognizable monster, but as an important one, is one singular key trait: the loss of control. More than grotesque cannibals or festering hordes, zombies are human beings turned automaton. They've experienced death or some other form of profound corruption which has wrenched control of their actions away from them and handed it off to something inhuman and unempathetic. They're a walking reminder that without agency to think and act for itself, mankind is nothing, just a flesh robot at the mercy of the soul. It creates a sense of dissonance more visceral than a simple confrontation with death could ever be, which I think is what makes zombies such a potent and memorable monster, whatever form they take. They are humans, minus the humanity. In the book I was talking about earlier, this is exactly what's happening. Maybe the children are human, and maybe they are in control most of the time, but when they smell human flesh, for that moment, their humanity is on hold and something else has taken over. Without any rotting tissue or severed limbs, without dying and coming back, they become little zombies. The fact that they're human before and after really only makes it more tragic. They're sympathetic in a way that simple shambling corpses just can't be. Which is why I think they make such a great case for zombies as protagonists. In the vast majority of zombie stories, they're really not much more than menacing punching bags. Our heroes lay into them with crowbars and chainsaws, slaughtering them by the dozen, and then, when it's convenient for the plot, oh, hey, somebody got bit. Drama. These stories treat their monster more as an environmental stressor than anything else, and you know, I think that's fine. We don't really want our haggard survivors to stop and stare into the vacant eye sockets of every ghoul, mourning humanity lost. That's not what these stories are about. Usually. But sprinkled throughout the generations of fiction in this genre, you can actually find a not insignificant number of stories that experiment with the idea of sympathetic zombies. Yes, some of them, like the movie Warm Bodies and the show iZombie, are a little more in the territory of gimmicks. How zany would it be if we made the main character a zombie? But there were a number that really tried to make a genuine exploration of it. By the end of Richard Matheson's 1954 book I Am Legend, which, fun fact, was one of Romero's inspirations for Night of the Living Dead, we find that none of the zombies are quite what we expect them to be, and we've sort of been rooting for the wrong cause the whole time. In the 2017 film The Cured, a cure for a zombie plague is discovered, and those who were once zombies have to try and reintegrate into society, living with the burden of all the things they've done. Even Frankenstein's monster is a creature in a body not its own, whose mind is fragmented and haunted by compulsions, desires, predispositions someone else chose for it. In one way or another, all of these stories are about people whose humanity has been in some measure stolen away by compulsions alien to them. They've done terrible things against their own will, and the human part of them has to live with that. What an incredibly stressful inner conflict for a character to deal with. It provides a depth to the archetype we almost never see. And that is what I love about these weird zombie children in this book. They show that if you give just a bit of the humanity back to a zombie, allow them the capacity to be aware of what's happening to them, maybe even the ability to respond in some way, you end up with something far more complex and interesting than even the most novel monster. You give a dead archetype new life. So much life, in fact, that I really think they could have the potential to steal the show. There's something intrinsically powerful about this idea of a character trapped within a self that they can no longer control. The main character of The Girl with All the Gifts is a little half-zombie child named Melanie. She is everything we've discussed so far, but she's also a genius, and she loves the humans around her dearly, or at least one of them. This makes her hunger the most terrifying thing in the world to her, because she knows that if it strikes, she will harm someone she cares about. So she spends the book trying to process these emotions, trying to come to terms with who she is, and trying so very, very hard not to be a danger to anyone. To me, this is so striking because it's not just an interesting point of conflict for her, it's the conflict every single human being faces every single day. Bear with me. This goes back to traditional psychology. Each person has an id, ego, and superego, which respectively describe one's natural impulses, their self-conduct, and their self-awareness. The everyday battle is one the ego wages, trying to satisfy as much of the id's desire as possible, whilst avoiding the judgments and the emotional punishments of the superego. There are plenty of things people want to do that they know they shouldn't, and it typically requires conscious effort to reconcile those two things. Very often, however, the id will win out even while the superego is screaming that it should not. Someone will cheat on a lover, or steal something from a store, or procrastinate writing a video script, and so they end up feeling guilt or shame, or at the very least a fear of repercussions. This is the essential struggle Melanie and every other zombie with a leftover human conscience faces. Except, unlike a normal human being, they don't really get a choice, and the stakes are much higher than an act of infidelity or avarice. This strange part of their id has complete control, and the poor ego sits hostage in the brain while the superego berates it for its failure to intervene. We can imagine what this must be like. We can relate. It's ultimately a sympathetic experience for us because as intelligent creatures in an unforgiving universe, one of the things we're most afraid of is losing what little control we do have, and with it, our identity. This is all a recipe for an amazing story protagonist because the conflict is both fascinating and relatable. But it also gives us something a little more than that as well. You see, Melanie doesn't just struggle with this on the inside. She knows what's going to come when she catches a whiff of that delicious human scent, and she knows that she can't stop it. So she takes preemptive measures. She allows herself to be manacled and muzzled. She rides on the roof of the car instead of inside it. She runs off into the wilderness to hunt game and fill her belly so that the hunger won't be quite so profound. And to me, these actions make Melanie more than a good, sympathetic protagonist. They make her a hero. She's showing a willingness to face adversity for what she believes to be a moral reason. This is why it's always such a powerful moment when a character gets bit by a zombie and they decide to cut off their own arm or end their own life. It's tragic, it's horrific, but it's a small triumph over this terrible impending loss they're about to suffer, the harm they'll soon cause. Even someone who doesn't have the time to respond beforehand, if they're still in there, conscious, has time to be a hero. They could save their own psyche, try, however futilely, to fight the urges from within, which sometimes results in a zombie who's reluctant to say, eat that poor scared piece of meat who, they vaguely remember, was once their daughter. A zombie of this type might even make reparations once they're cured, recognizing what damage they've done against their will and working hard to right it. All of these are acts of heroism, feats of courage and bravery in the face of a fate literally worse than death. This book, The Girl with All the Gifts, showed me that our historical fascination with zombies isn't just because they're a symbol of death, although they are that. It's in part because they're a symbol of life, the inner life, the ongoing struggle against the powerful natural impulses that try to govern the body, and the higher ideals and feats of willpower that keep equilibrium and, in the end, shape identity. It feels good to see this sort of triumph, even if it's a small one in the end. It promises that no one, not even a zombie, has to be slave to the dark aspects of their own nature. There is room for heroism here, and valiant tragedy. So, if you're playing around with zombification in your fiction, maybe consider letting the psyche live on for a while. See what it does under all that pressure, how the person inside the monster reacts. I guarantee you'll find depths beneath the rotting flesh you never knew were there. Of course, every good zombie apocalypse needs a good gimmick. If you are going to experiment with this idea, you're also going to have to figure out whether your zombies are the result of occult magic or a fungal parasite, a virus, or an underworld overcapacity. Whatever the case is, you're going to end up with a world very different from our own, and it's going to get hard to manage in a hurry. Lucky for you, I know a tool that can make the whole process so much easier. If you're not familiar, Campfire Blaze is a browser-based suite of tools to help you keep your writing organized. You can collaborate with friends in real time or work by yourself to flesh out every facet of your story. Create characters, design your plot, and world build every single piece of your setting, all in one place. When it comes time to turn your world into a story, you can also develop your entire manuscript right there in Blaze's word processor. When you're done, sharing your work with your friends and fans is incredibly easy. No more sending out 30 different copies of your manuscript. You also have a lot of freedom to customize how you pay for it. Start with the free version, then expand by buying just the tools you need permanently, or build a subscription by adding features for as little as 50 cents a piece, which means to use everything, you'd only be paying a few dollars a month. And if you're on the fence, no risk. There's a 30-day return policy. Follow the link in the description to learn more. Write better stories faster with Campfire Blaze. Before we wrap up, I'd like to give a quick thanks to all the helpful humans who support the show on Patreon. All those words you see scrolling in the background of these videos, those are actually the names of our Patreon maintenance crew, without whom this show would be impossible. And a special word to all of our top patrons, Lord Gate, RPG Grenade, and the Autumn Rider. Thank you so much. And that's it for this video. There's usually a few weeks between uploads, so if you want more Tale Foundry in the meantime, come join our community. We have a Discord server that's basically like a big family of creatives, a lot of love there. We also run a writing group on Twitch every single week if you want to get some practice in. You can find links to all of it in the description. Hope to see you there. Until then, thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!